What is the difference between being punk and being a punk?
We are here to talk some punk rock, some music, comics.
Punk culture, DIY shit, anything we want to talk about.
That's what fascinates me. Give me everything. Absolutely everything.
I find that music and comics have always been intertwined.
Muckspout.
Chicks dig it. Don't worry.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Muckspout.
Howdy, everybody.
Stupid Rad Stupid Rad Merch Company, makers of amazing T-shirts, custom hats, keychains, stickers. Most of John's wardrobe.
Probably, yeah. Give or take. Actually, I think the Dolly Rods do all their own stuff, but still. Yeah.
Not today. And today we have with us Brandon from Apollo City Comics.
Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me on, guys. I'm super excited to. And by the way, that was the coolest intro I've ever seen.
I do video production for a living, so.
Oh, dude, we'll talk maybe after the show. We'll see what's
Okay.
up. But yeah, that was some cool stuff. It started and I was like, whoa. So hi. Thank you.
Well,
Eric makes everything look beautiful. So
I try. I have a graphic design background, so I can't be looking jank, right? So I don't know, a couple weeks ago, John sent me a link and said, "Hey, check this out." And there was the Apollo City Comics Punk Anthology. And it was partly like, holy shit, we were looking to do something like this. And then partly like, holy shit, I got to back this real quick. Like,
yeah, because with the look looking like the cover that looked like the Rancid cover.
Yeah, that's
Eric's
right up our alley.
Yeah, Eric's a big Rancid guy, so
Yeah,
shit, that's right up his alley. So
That's
yeah.
so sick. That's awesome. Yeah, huge Rancid fan. That cover, Nicholas Freshen, he's from Canada. He actually illustrated my story in the Punk Anthology.
Oh, cool.
It's kind of a prequel for a series called Teenage Babylon that I'm working on right now. And what he did with that cover that's so cool and unique is that not only did he like reshape it instead of like the hands down, that Rancid and Out Come the Wolves cover, but he's holding a comic, and on the floor, all those little comics you see are from stories inside of the anthology.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, so he kind of incorporated everyone's work into that cover. It's a very, very special and well thought out thing he did.
Cool. I'll have to go back and take a closer look at that. I love little inside things like that.
Yeah, Rancid was one of my beginning favorite bands ever, playing bass as a punk kid, and it was just him choosing that without us even having a discussion about it. It was like, oh, perfect.
That's kismet.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good use of that design too.
Yeah, perfect.
I liked that. Tell us about the podcast, I guess, first. That's kind of where things start out for you guys, right?
Yeah, so I have been running the show called Apollo City Comics for the last 4.5 years almost. And basically it was just a way for me to, when I was in school studying, trying to break into comics, trying to figure stuff out. I used to intern for comic book websites and try to break into comics that way. And when that kind of got all like, jumbled up and, stuff was hard to pick up, I just made my own show. And it's all about just, we study the craft of comics, we do overviews of books, we do movie commentaries, and then we started doing a lot of indie creator interviews just to kind of give a boost to like indie creators. And I at first I wanted to go for like the Tom Kings and stuff like that, the Scott Snyders and Donnie Cates, and interview them because I used to do interviewing with my old internships. I discovered that like the indie community was like the stepping stone, and like if I was really gonna learn how to like break into comics, I should be interviewing the indie people, and that would be my way, hopefully, through it. And somehow through all of that, we met Mark from Lesser Known Comics and developed a friendship and a kind of a partnership at this point. And through that, we've kind of become my mentor in a big sense. It's going to be kind of annoying saying so much nice things about me and Mark if you guys have heard it off the air. But yeah, Mark is just like a wonderful dude that really gave us some good ideas. And when I was pitching to him a book called Teenage Babylon, he was like, make a punk anthology out of it because it's a punk themed book. And, through the podcast, all that kind of came together. Just 4.5 years of just nonstop episodes, rotation. I had a my first co-host, and then we brought Brandon on, and it's Brandon and Brandon basically. And now we have a new co-host with us named Alex that's joining our crew, and it's just been expanding and growing in ways that I've never thought possible. And just, it's just an indie little kind of a punk rock DIY. We're not doing what's trending. We're not, it's rare that we kind of do all the Marvel stuff. It's rare that we do all the DC stuff.
Yep.
That's like in the air right now. We're not covering Suicide Squad comics or things like that. We're just kind of right now we're doing a Miracle Man like overview, and nobody gives a fuck about it. I don't know if I could cuss on the show, but
oh yeah, say what the fuck you
want. You have to revoke our punk card if you couldn't.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, perfect. And it's like one of those things, like, we just kind of want to do what we enjoy and what we love, because if you do what's trending all the time, you're gonna burn out. If you do what's everyone's talking about it already,
Right.
And so we just kind of do our own spin. So somehow it's evolved, and a lot of people have kind of caught on to that. And podcasts like Cartoonist Kayfabe were huge influences on us, and it's weird. It trips me out, like having a following and a good growth with the show, and now producing books and comics for the first time.
Yeah, that's cool. So how did you step from podcasting to actually creating a book? Like
So with that, the whole goal, luckily, Brandon and I are very similar people. My co-host and I, we both grew up playing music. We both, grew up from punk bands and metal bands, and loving, Blink-182 and Star Wars and stuff like that. And we actually were both writers. We're musicians that turned into writers over a few years, just kind of music's hard to break into and almost impossible at this point, And so our whole goal was to try to network and to try to find creators to either, meet to work with, or, find someone in like the crowd to kind of like, hey, we can help you draw a book or connect you with an artist. So that was the whole point of just the show, is just how can we break into comics this way? And, the show seems like such the highlight of everything all the time, but really the highlight for us is using that to like make comics. And it's taken 4.5 years, but dude, we were finally doing it after all this time with all the hard work we put into it. And with Teenage Babylon, when I finally found an artist, Nicholas, and he wanted to do the short story. And so I was showing it to Mark from Lesser Known, and he was like, you know what, if you want to build a base, your Teenage Babylon is a cosmic punk rock love story. And he's like, if you want to kind of build a marketing thing, and this is no secret, I hope people like take from that, and kind of build upon it too. But like, he's like, put out an anthology first, an anthology that's themed to your book in a sense. Your book has a punk rock feel to it. Maybe do a punk rock anthology. And that way you build a base, and you're not starting from zero with a crowdfunding and a Kickstarter. And that way the people who, read your anthology, like the punk rock stuff, they're going to see your book come out after that. And they'll be even more interested because like, hey, this is from the anthology and it has this punk rock feel to it. I like punk rock comics. Let me check this out. And so now because of that, it's like turned into an uproar, and we're kind of working on doing maybe even like a little imprint with Lesser Known Comics with Apollo City, where we're going to have a few series. Like I have Teenage Babylon in the works, a series called Fake Your Death in the works, and a series called Kids of Yesterday in the works right now. And so hopefully all those, kind of fruition and come true. Comics are one of those things. Until it's in your hands, it's just an idea. So all those are in progress right now. And Brandon has some cool stuff up his sleeve that he's trying to get off the ground too. So it's weird. Like I said, it just trips me out how it all just intertwines into one another.
That's great. I'm going the opposite direction right now. I started out with a book and a single book, and now I want to make an anthology so that I can continue it in parts, because it's a lot of fucking work to put together a big book again.
I'm discovering it is. That's been a big lesson in this whole.
I ended up being a 211-page book, so now I'm like, I just want to do some 10-page stories about these guys for a while.
There you go. Yeah, and I'm kind of doing the same with the series Fake Your Death right now, starting off smaller. Teenage Babylon's going to have kind of single stories before we do into something big, but we all kind of have some small goals like that. It's also so weird. Like, I want to ask you more about your book because I'm so used to being like the host of a show, and I just want to like turn the conversation around. It's like really awkward. Like, oh, now I got to embellish and talk about stuff. But yeah, actually, tell me about your book. Can I know about that? Can you talk that about?
Yeah, this podcast is very conversational. We kind of shoot the shit. It's very loose format. So if you have questions, feel free to shoot them back at us. So
it'd be natural instinct for me, just as
absolutely
in the chair.
Here's the cover for it. Blister. It's about some punk rock kids growing up in the 90s. Just kind of a slice of life book. And it's 8 stories in it that kind of they have like an overarching like story. You could originally I put out 2 books as just single issues, and it kind of all bridges together, but they're single stories. Like when you pick them up, like you can pick up any of the 8 chapters and be just fine. Like, so I ended up putting it together as a 211-page book because I was just tired of putting it out, piecemealing it, So, so yeah, that's Blister, and then I have a bunch of merch and stuff that I've done since I did that a couple years ago now.
That's cool. Maybe you could send that to Punk Anthology pretty soon and get that, just spread the word a little bit about it in an upcoming volume we could talk about.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd be into it.
Actually, like a fun fact about this anthology, I think you guys would really dig because you guys are into punk rock. But do you know the band Lagwagon?
Yeah.
And Joey Cape, he has that band, Bad Astronaut.
Yeah.
So we have a story. Mark Bernal and Karen, they have a book called Death Wish. It's on the lesser known comics catalog, and one of the main characters in it, and he actually has a special short story in this anthology. But his logo, his icon, we got special permission. The one that's on his helmet, we got permission to use the Bad Astronaut logo.
Oh, that's cool.
And Joey Cape gave us like written permission to use it. So we're gonna try to get a copy in Joey Cape's hands and have him like promote that just a little bit, because that's just like a total win, you know what I mean? Just to put that stamp on there.
Yeah, I saw him on an acoustic show a few years ago, right before COVID, I guess. It was amazing. It was like a room like twice the size of the room I'm in right now. Like it wasn't very big. Like it was just a great experience. But yeah, he's awesome.
What a good dude. Yeah, his voice. He's just one of my favorite punk vocalists ever, honestly. Best frontman.
Amazing. So your show, so your partner on your show, you guys grew up with similar experiences. How long have you known him? Like how did you guys get together?
We actually met at San Diego Comic-Con in 2019 because we were both standing in line to get Todd McFarlane's autograph for about 3 hours. And during those 3 hours, you just start becoming friends with people around you at a certain point. And it was one of those things where, we started kind of talking and establishing like, hey, you got a Star Wars tattoo. And then we just, the whole Blink-182 thing. And then we realized we're both musicians, both writers and all this type of stuff. Brandon, but he lives in San Francisco. I'm from El Paso, Texas. And it was one of those things where we're just like, hey, dude, like, let's exchange info. And we became friends over a couple of months. And around COVID, during that whole time when all of us were just like adjusting to that new life change, you know what I mean? And, all of our habits started changing. All the people we kind of like talk to all of the day, they kind of changed. My old co-host, David, he had stepped aside, and we brought Brandon in just to see how he would fill in for a few episodes, And from there, it just like skyrocketed. And him and I have just been hard at it for the past few years. And just that whole Zoom communication, not having to go to someone's house to record a podcast, and the way we do stuff now, it's just like it worked out perfectly. And and that's how we got Alex. Alex lives in Fort Worth, Texas. I now live in Winchester, Virginia, which is right outside of DC, which also kind of felt very appropriate for the whole like punk rock anthology too. Like knowing what all the bands that came out from DC and stuff like that, and then this was happening. Really interesting thing. But yeah, he's a vital part, and I don't think I could do the show without like my co-host, I don't know if I'm a standalone type of guy to be doing stuff like comic book overviews and providing insight and information on that.
Yeah, the internet, like all this sort of thing has been amazing for us, like because John's on the other side of the world over, and
I'm in Western Massachusetts. He's in Chicago. Our other co-host is from Toronto. So it's definitely intriguing to try to line some of this stuff up. And as you know, I'm sure from trying to line different guests up, if you have multiple guests, we had the guys from Geezer, the Comic-Con, and we had one guy was in California and the other guy's in England. So we're trying to get all the time zones to match up so that we can actually interview these people.
Like by the time we were done, it was like 2 a.m. or whatever, like for him. Like,
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, Geezer, that's Shelley Bond's husband.
Yes.
Funny enough that's even what you guys just did, because Shelley Bond's Filth and Grammar class is how I met Nicholas, the guy who did the cover.
Oh, cool. Yep.
Story. And we kind of just were kind of like doing that Instagram flirting, like, hey man, it'd be cool to do a book together and maybe we could promote it, you know, blah blah blah, and like that. And if it wasn't for Shelley Bond doing that filth and grammar class, in fact, her book is somewhere right around me in this box, but that's like what really brought us together. And Philip Bond did one of my favorite books, Kill Your Boyfriend, with Grant Morrison. And that's too cool. I got to check out that episode with you guys.
Yeah, we love those guys. And
Geezer's amazing.
Yeah, if you haven't read Geezer, highly recommend it. It's so good. And it's got all those little tidbits of, it's the kind of like you were saying with your cover where, you know, all the different things on the ground had little snippets of the stuff in between. It was the same thing. If you blow up the digital version of any panel, there's no wasted space. It's all like flyers for old bands and like little inside jokes and little stickers for cool bands like Wet Leg and things like that. And it's just awesome to see like how much they can pack into a panel like that. It's amazing.
It's all the stuff that I'm afraid to do because I don't want to get sued for having some logo on my
Yeah.
I do like generic like punk rock looking posters and stuff in my, but I never like do very much specific. I think I did the character from Op Ivy on one panel at one point, but like I'm a little careful on what I do like that. So when you go to theirs, it's like every panel might have like 30 copyright infringements in my head, but
yeah. But I mean, I'm sure if you've been in the industry long enough, that's one of those. That would be a whole nerdy separate conversation. But it's like
it's my marketing background makes me paranoid of that stuff.
Exactly. But it's like it's one of those things that makes me crazy thinking about like, all right, how far off of actual do you have to go to be able to be like, all right, that's not really like suable necessarily.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, and especially in comics, I feel like it's more of a flattering thing that it's, you know, being put on there like the Batman poster or something like that than anything else. Especially for some of these punk bands. I would love to do more. I don't know how we're going to do the next anthology of volumes, but there's definitely going to be more volumes. And we're thinking about making the main cover for each one like an homage to a punk album. You know, I would love a Clash homage or something from the Descendants or something like that. Like I think that would just be too much fun. And but that there is that thing where when I got the cover for this one, I was like, we won't get in trouble for this, right? Like this is a total, like even down to the title, like we kind of stole everything.
I think there's certain wording in a lot of it where as long as it's fair homage, it's usually okay. But
yeah. And we'll be the first ones to admit for all of it. Like this is a total like rancid like salute, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, it all kind of ties together too, because like one of my most influential like punk rock things that made me be like, I want to play music, I want to go out there and make art was that Give 'Em the Boot DVD that came out all those years ago. And that's when like Joe Strummer was in it with the Mescaleros and things like that. And I used to watch that like repeatedly as a kid. And seeing like the Roots Radicals like acoustic show and stuff like that, like I just love like the way it was filmed and, you know, produced, and it introduced me to so many bands as a kid. That was just all tied together, and it's all because of bands like Rancid, you know, like.
And you still get that too, like what's that? I can't remember the name of it now. There was a East Bay punk documentary that came out a couple years ago though, and like it's the vinyl I think it's at least two vinyls, but it's just jam packed with bands like that played in the East Bay and stuff. And like I love it. It's just from top to bottom, it's just a great record.
Oh yeah, compilations for years have been just like, I remember my wife getting me into This Is Boston Not LA. It's just one of the for the old school punk was just fucking amazing. And it's just like, I'm a little older than everybody else on the show, so I've got a slightly older taste, but still
I feel like even with like the indie comics community that I've been involved with, I found I was like one of the younger people in it. Like I'm not too young, I'm 31, I just turned 31, you know. But a lot of the people I'm like hanging out with and just like learning from in the industry are like that 35, 38 and above. And I'm just like, you guys know all the secrets. Like you are the ones I want to be talking to, and listening to, and getting the experience from. And also like getting the best references from too. You know what I mean? Because like as much as I love punk history and I always dive into it, I'm always reading books and whatnot. I mean, I grew up during the era of like Blink-182 and Green Day, and when it was doing that shift to like pop punk and Warped Tour, and that's where you were being introduced to bands and everything. So like, you know, finding other fans that like not a lot of all my friends like, earlier punk music and whatnot, like The Damned or I don't know, just shit like that. And it's always great hearing like other references because new punk bands are great. But I love, even when I was like, as a musician growing up, I'd dive into like classical and I'd always want to go back to the beginnings, just like with comics. I love my Jack Kirby. I love my Steve Ditko. I love my Golden Age stuff because like that's where it kind of all originated from. So I love studying that and hearing the evolution of it all.
And that's what I love is just hearing everybody's take, old and young, and just like getting that, like, because some of the stuff, like I try to keep up on everything, but there's a lot of older folks that don't hear as much. So I like to have the younger people in the room to be able to know, all right, what am I missing out on? Because I love everything, just like show me what you got. I want to hear about all the comics and all the music. And yeah, it's so fun to like when you have somebody else have that same passion as you do, regardless of where and when it came from. It gives you that special little tingle in your cockles that makes you feel so good about turning somebody else onto a new band or comic or something like that. It's just like,
especially when you find like a person that you really trust for that information. Like if John sends me a Kickstarter link, I click on it and I almost click pledge now before I scroll.
I try not to waste folks' time with stuff. And I know what you like, so I try to make sure it's pointed exactly what you want. So,
and anytime Ben shares a link to a band, I always know it's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Like he's turned me on to a number of bands now. Like, so it's nice having that still. And that's one of the focuses of our show too, is to bring the new bands and people that people haven't heard so much. Like, and then every now and then we will pull in a veteran that we have some kind of link to and chat about the old days and maybe some of that knowledge that they sprinkle down.
That should be something we incorporate from now on, is have every guest and every host just swap some music ideas and comic ideas. It's like, all right, what you got for me? Like, I want to hear something that you like. What do you like? It'd be interesting to turn each other on.
Like honestly, like if you guys ever have music recommendations or stuff like that, I'm always looking forward to that. That was a big reason why we did the playlist for the anthology too. We kind of put together a Spotify playlist. We're gonna make one for Apple and whatnot too to be more flexible for people. But that was just a way for us to exchange like punk music and bands with one another and also show it with the community as well for some influence. But honestly, if I could just spit out some recommendations, like if I have to like ever recommend a book to someone, one that's just like an essential read, for everyone, I think it's Sandman, because Sandman is just
so good.
I have one comic book tattoo and it says Dream's Helm on my arm. But honestly, like that and Shade the Changing Man, not enough people I feel like
that was wonderful too. Yeah,
that's some mind-blowing stuff. And I feel like the more people like learn about Shade and what he could do in the drama that was kind of involved in that series, I think a lot of people would enjoy that nowadays.
I think all of that old original Vertigo stuff, that content was just ridiculous. It was just so much fun. So
I always end up going back to that with those Vertigo days more than anything. And speaking of Shelley Bond, you know what I mean? That's where a lot of that influence came from, Kill Your Boyfriend was a Vertigo book, and I kind of got into comics especially because of Grant Morrison and his whole like rock and roll like punk aesthetic to things, and learning about the X-Specs and the Invisibles and things like that.
Absolutely. I think it was Grant Morrison. A lot of the UK people like Garth Ennis and Warren Ellis and all those people were huge in my formative years for like that, getting into the weird stuff, the fun stuff.
Warren did that book Coming Alone, and it was like a whole book of his like I guess CBR articles, and at the end of every article he would give like a movie, a music, and a reading suggestion.
I love it when people do that.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm there Googling and looking up stuff at the end of every single like chapter I read, and then just building a cool playlist of weird stuff. Yeah, I love things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My big formative comic was Bone, Jeff Smith's work.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic too. I got into that really, really late, but like it's just so delightful. Yeah,
I love Jeff Smith. I had so he was at C2E2 this year, and I wanted to get something signed by him, but it turns out like over the years I've pretty much had everything I own signed. Like I'm not going to bring in like Bone number 53 or something. Like like all of my like important Jeff Smith stuff is already signed. So I found that I hadn't bought one of his trades in hardcover and color, so I bought that while I was there just to have him sign it.
I was going to say you crossed the line between rock and roll and comics so often. You should have just pulled your shirt down, pretended like it was a concert, and had him sign your cleavage, and then you could have gotten it tattooed after the fact. So
The final signature. That's what that'll be, you know? Like
I was also trying to keep it a safe experience for my son.
yeah, there you go.
oh, fine.
Yeah. It was a fun chance for my son to meet a creator, though. It was cool. Actually, he was really nice. We actually ran into him in the hallway the day before I did that, and I had met him a number of times throughout the years. Not like we know each other, but so I introduced my son to him, and he had a really sweet conversation with my son. And so,
awesome.
I love that guy.
I love, like, the best thing about meeting creators, especially when I was writing for like websites and just doing interviews like that, was just meeting the real humble people and just like the legends that you're just like, you're really like awfully nice. For, like, how amazing
Oh,
you
my
know?
favorite of that is at C2E2, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder were doing signings together, and I got in line, and the line wrapped around the convention center, you know, and there was a time they were going to be at the table, and it was somebody came around and like updated everybody that, you know, Scott Snyder got pulled into something and he's running like 40 minutes late, and we had already been sitting there for a while, but at that point Greg Capullo was just sitting there waiting. He wasn't taking autographs at the table. He actually went to the back of the line and he worked himself up through the line from the back, shaking everybody's hands, taking pictures, thanking them for being there, telling him how much he appreciated it. He wasn't signing stuff yet because he had to do that at the table, but he was just making everybody's experience amazing. Like, I had this great conversation with him, great handshakes, and I took a terrible selfie, but he looked fine in it. So. But it was
always so sweet. Like,
just so awesome.
I got to meet them like almost I got to go to San Diego Comic-Con like four years in a row. I got real lucky and was able to do that. Actually, I have a really cool San Diego Comic-Con announcement that I could tell you guys in a bit too, regarding the book too. But I would bump into Greg and Scott started to recognize me year after year. And he was like, dude, I've seen you. You come here. You were here the last 2 years, right? And I was like, dude, Scott, yes. Like, what the fuck? Like, I think at the time I had a mohawk for fucking years until like maybe mid-COVID or so. But I think that's what like made me recognizable for a bit, was just my flat mohawk down and just like getting books signed and everything. Yeah, those guys are sweethearts, some of the best. Them and actually at San Diego, the table I hang out with, David Lloyd hangs out there, and that's where David Lloyd does all his signing and whatnot. So David would just tell us some cool stories while he just gets like drunk on red wine the entire convention, just slamming it down and talking about the British 80 days, and it's just one of the funnest things in the world. Donny Cates is real cool too. He's always a sweetheart. The few times I've met him, yeah,
that's awesome.
But and speaking of San Diego, so this year at San Diego Comic-Con, I was actually invited to do a panel about how music influences comic books.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
Nice.
Us and Gabe Valentine, who did Digital Lizards of Doom, and but Mark Bernal from Lesser Known Comics should be going down there with us as well. But we'll be talking about music and comics, and we actually just might. I think it's just about locked in, but we haven't announced like too much of it. But there might be a San Diego variant of this book.
Cool.
At the convention, and it'll be like a special cover and a special printing of the book. So a lot of cool stuff going on this summer regarding the anthology and everything too.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So let's go back to the anthology for a minute. Could you walk us through like some little snippets of the different stories that are in there?
Yeah, so actually let me pull up the list. There's 14
awesome.
stories in it. There is 27 creators in total on this book, which is the mind-blowing part. Just so much creative art. And it was one of those things, I opened submissions and I thought I would get like, maybe 10, 15 submissions. I was already getting ready to ask some friends, like, hey, would you be down or interested to put something out there if I make this? And actually I got 80 submissions in.
Wow,
nice.
Yeah, that's too many.
It's
that's too much work for me.
Yeah, it was crazy just sitting there and going through each and every submission, being like, okay, like what's good about this one? Does it meet the guidelines? And to the point where we had to get really strict on what we were doing in the book, and really just tying down like, okay, these ones are great. But if we do a volume 2, is this too many heavy hitters in volume 1? Then that's going to be in volume 2 to keep the thing rolling. And we just kept on cutting and cutting and cutting, and we wound up with 60 pages with these 14 stories. It opens up with a story called Punk's Not Dead. It's weird. We have 2 one-page stories, and those 2 one-page stories have more creators on it than any other 2 to 6
Really?
pages. Yeah, this one has Laura. He's Helsley as the artist, Christian Herrera as the writer, Eros Denardi as the colorist, and Tobin. I don't even know how to say Tobin's last name. I'm not going to mess that up too hard. Doing letters on it, and I mess up last names so much. And if you listen to Apollo City Comics, I'm always messing up names, so I'm sorry for everybody as much as I butcher them. And that's a cool one-page story. We also have David Lujan, who did the book Narita. His Kickstarter just wrapped up. He also does a book called Yuriko, which is this really cool, like sexy vampire Japanese book. Like it's super rad. And that Kickstarter is gonna be going on pretty soon. But he does a book called A Night at the Parlor, and that story is about this bar he used to work at and just the experiences he used to have there, and just like translating that. Because a big thing about the punk anthology is that I asked everybody on the submission, what does punk mean to you? And this can be expressed through the art, through the story, through like the theme, anything you can to express punk rock through your comic. And that was one of David's ways, just being like, I worked at this freaking wild bar, and it was just like literally the most punk thing you could do is just sit around and listen to the people there and check out the atmosphere. And so we opened up with that. Once we do Punk's Not Dead, you go into this crazy bar scene, and it's like his visceral colors are amazing because he has a very small palette. He only uses about 3 colors per series that he works on. And so he's really intricate on how he does it. In fact, cool little thing to interest you into his book Yuriko that's going to kickstart soon is that the backgrounds, the textures, he gets his thumbprint and just presses on the ink and uses his thumbprint as textured background. And until he told me that, I would have never fucking known. It's done that well. It's super cool. The next one is by Doug Knight. Doug Knight actually has a Kickstarter going on right now. And if you back his Kickstarter, in fact, just look up Doug Knight or look up lesser known comics. And the book that they're putting out, it's called White Cell. Let me look up the name real fast so I don't destroy it. Super Wicked White Cell Squadron. That book, they're trying to get into children's hospitals. So not only are you benefiting a creator, but you're trying to benefit a way to get comics into because Doug is one of those dudes who's just such an amazing guy. And because he is legally blind, he had cancer when he was a kid, and it messed up his eyes. And, he's gone through a lot of stuff and a lot of life trials, and here he is, a tattoo artist making badass comics, and is one of those guys who's just like, oh, something bad's happening in your life. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to make it better? Someone that always pushes on, and I respect him so much for that. But he has a short story called Escapocalypse now. And it's such a cool, wild, trippy, out of this world. You see the colors, you see his artwork, and it's just the coolest fucking thing in the world. It's almost like punk rock Mad Max insanity. And you have this Scott out horn player in it and some crazy stuff going in on it, and it's a lot of fun. And we have one called Elliot's Song, which is a story I wrote. That's with Nicholas, the cover artist. That what I'm using the anthology for is to kind of prep up my book, Teenage Babylon. So you kind of learn about this character, Elliot, who's the main character in the book. You could read this by itself. You could read Teenage Babylon without reading this, but it's more of an insight on the character in his life and the events that led up that shaped him to who he is. And, when you see the punk rock version of him, in Teenage Babylon, you're going to see, oh, that's why he's a piece of shit, because we just read his whole life story over here. So this all kind of adds up and makes sense. And then we have Banger, which is a cool little punk rock fish story from Jason Cadwell, a little nice one pager. Death Wish. That one, we actually used the lyrics from the song Unlucky Stuntman from Bad Astronaut. And we kind of applied it to the story as it follows one of the main characters from the series Death Wish. And during all of this, there's a couple snippets inside the anthology where the quotes I got from what punk means to these creators, I asked all of them what it meant, and I put their quotes inside of the book. So you're going to get these cool little kind of tagged up walls with quotes saying what punk rock means to them and why it mattered to them in the anthology. that's like the first half of it, to be honest. It's so much. It's so crazy. This girl, China, she did this really beautiful one pager for us. Max Flowers did a book called Stage Fright. Max Flowers actually helped us do the patches for the book too. In fact, I might have one. Oh, one of the patches right here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Let me there we go.
Yeah, this is one of them. We're getting some more sent. I have some more. They're scattered somewhere because of the move and everything, or else I'd show them off. But if you do the patch set, I think it's about $10. You get like 7 or 9 patches sent to you, and they're all from creators in the book. There's one from Stage Fright. China did a really cool one. There's a Teenage Babylon one. There's a new Apollo City Comics one with a new logo on it. All sorts of cool stuff with that patch set. Also, one I want to kind of highlight too. Let me see real fast. Not only did Jade Lauder do one, and that kind of spins off of one of his main series. It's a horror show, but we also had Dylan Kobrisser, who did a book recently called Metal. I think it's Metalhead Samurai, and that Kickstarter's what did phenomenal. And if you guys haven't checked out Dylan's stuff, I'll send it to you because it's
that'd be cool.
Dig it.
Yeah, I think I backed Metalhead Samurai.
Yeah, Metalhead Samurai. Yeah. That's going to be a great one. He's from Canada. Great creator. That dude has some cool stuff coming out soon after that. But there's also one called Belly Rider, and Belly Rider with this dude Davey Lee and Nathaniel. They actually put a theme song to it too. So they wrote and recorded a fun theme song. You could purchase it for $2 as an add-on as well, and it's just a fun thing that they had with. Like it's phenomenal. One of the coolest stories we have in the book. That's going to turn to a series too that they're trying to take off.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. And there's a few more. There's like Ticket Trick, Ramshackle Roots with Travis and Tanner, their brothers. That Hiss, Laura, actually, who did the art for the first story in it, Punk's Not Dead, actually did the art for this one too, but with a different creative team. And I think that's it. It's all 14 stories. So much. It's freaking wild, dude. Yeah, and we try to limit the book to about 60 pages because we didn't want it to be overwhelming, and we didn't want to make it too big to where people would not continue reading after a bit. I grew up as a really big fan of heavy metal because of the movie, and I got into the magazine because of that. So this is like my attempt to do like a heavy metal magazine and kind of do what they did, how they might have continuous stories. It might just be one shots, but a good blend and variety of art styles, of creators, and every story is going to feel fresh. It is one of the most colorful, insane books I've ever seen. And I'm not just saying that to promote it, like, and that, it's the book I put together, but these artists put so much like work into this, and it just pops so well that I think when you guys get your hands on it, you'll just be really, really satisfied with a 60-page thick comic book that's filled with just fun punk rock stories.
Yeah, everything I saw from the Kickstarter page looked fantastic for the promos, art, and everything like that. And it's always fun to see. I always find it fun to get an anthology just to get a feel for some new writers and artists. And it's kind of like, it's almost like going through a catalog of like, what cool new people am I going to meet in this issue? And what are they, what stories do they have for me? And it's so much fun discovering new talent that way.
It is like those music comps, the music compilations.
Exactly. Like, it's the exact same feel to it. It's
like Give Them the Boot Warped Tour compilation from Apollo City Comics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of these creators, like, myself included, it's their first time being published in comics. Tanner and Travis, it's their first time. And when you see Tanner's and Travis's work, they have this crazy jukebox robot in their story, and it is just the most wild scene ever. And then a lot of these creators, when you really look at the artistic effort that went into it, because crowds are hard to draw, as so many of these people have told me, because I'm not an artist. But there's like a crowd.
Verify.
yeah, honestly, like it's one of those things that almost every single story has like a crowd scene. So you guys know that they spent hours at the drawing table trying to like get this right and get it perfect.
Especially at a punk show. Yeah, you want to make sure you got that, like, do you have the right kid crowd surfing? Do you have, yeah, exactly, who's jumping off the stage? It's exactly, you want it to be just the mood set right. So,
and just the attitude and the energy that comes from punk rock, you could feel it jumping out from each one of these stories. And all, how there's punk, how there's just I don't know, you have Rancid, but then you kind of have like, I can't think of any bands off the top of my head, but like really hardcore punk that's like almost on the verge of metal, where you're just like, is this okay? This is kind of punk if you listen to the guitar quality and like stuff like that. Dylan's story, it's I'm spacing it out right now. Big fucking sword. Yeah, the hardcore punk, big fucking sword. It's literally the most metal punk rock story ever, because it's this chick with this fucking insane flaming mohawk fighting a dragon, and you just can't get more epic than that, to be honest. Like,
I was gonna say that sounds like it should be kind of spray painted on the side of a van for a tour at that point. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
And that's, you know, speaking of tour and all that, that's funny you said that, because Mark and I always talk about, like, Mark was also a musician before switching over to comics. All of us for some reason grew up with, like, you know, music. It's just part of our soul. And you know, making comics, I feel like we've all retired from music going into it, because it's kind of like going on tour but not taking the whole band with you. And therefore, like, friendships maintain longer, and like responsibilities are like easier to like take hold of, and everyone works on their stuff on their own time. But it's and going to conventions, you know, you all meet up, you have a good time, and then you're like, all right, cool, we're gonna go make good stuff and then do this again. But you don't got to be stuffed in a van for a month and a half to 3 months,
Right.
you know, for other dudes.
No, absolutely. So you talked a bit about the different people in the book all submitted what they think, what punk rock is to them. So what is punk rock to you, Brandon? Because you didn't have to answer that to get in the book.
No, I didn't. I felt like the book was I asked my artist to do it. I was like, hey, you answer this question. I'm gonna pass it over to you. Really, and it's cool. I kind of wrote my whole forward with that thought in my head. So when you read the forward, it's kind of like a good like explanation behind it. But to kind of like sum up like really what it is, it's community. I've really realized over the past year and a half, I went through a lot of like really hard stuff with life, and you know, went through some crazy just life lessons over, you know, 2022 and 21 and whatnot. And if it wasn't for like the community and the acceptance of the community and that encouragement and that ability to do stuff on my own, and that whole DIY aspect, and having that support, and just no matter what you put out there, no matter how badass or how shitty it might be, you're going to have that love and support and admiration. And being able to go somewhere where you feel comfortable, like a convention or a punk show, and you just see everyone there and you just feel like, fuck, this is where I belong. This is it. That essence of just like not having to hide who you are at all. That's really what's punk rock to me, you know? And just fully expressing yourself. I've never been one to like kind of conform to like a day job and stuff like that. So having all these artists, like, you know, we all get off work and then we start our actual job, and that's creating stuff, you know? Like,
Right.
I used to work for a marketing company. I work at a grocery store right now. Like, it's one of those things, like, it doesn't matter how I'm making my day job money. It's as long as I get to come home and like make my art and share that with people and see them make art. That's the coolest part, you know? Punk rock influenced me a lot as a kid. It made me a better musician for sure. I got to meet Matt Freeman from Rancid. It's weird bringing up Rancid again, but when my first time I saw Rancid, I got to meet Matt Freeman and stand next to him when I was like 14 years old.
Oh.
And he just like said I don't remember what he said, but it was super kind and super encouraging as like a 14-year-old bassist. And like, I just kind of shot it off from there. And I was like, you know what? Like, I can do this. Like, I'm seeing these people do it. Seeing them do it made me want to do it. And that's why, even with like, we have a segment on Apollo. We haven't kept up to it too much with it the past few months because of everything. But it's called Draw and Shit. It used to be called Drink and Draw, but it's just Draw and Shit. And you know, I wanted to learn how to draw. So in like 5 years, I could put out shitty comics. So in 10 years, I put out like a half shitty comic and just kind of go from there. But I got a lot of messages when we were doing Drink and Draw really consistently last year that people were like, I love seeing you do this because it's inspiring me to draw. It's, you know, seeing you do it every week and just jumping on, and it doesn't matter what happens, you're making it, you know, you're putting ink on the page and you're coloring and you're figuring it out. And we just love seeing you do that. And just hearing that from a couple people was just like, that's what it's about. Like, I want to put out comics and do the podcast and do all these things to show people you can do it too. And if it's shitty and if it sucks, and the big thing about drawing shit too is that not knowing how to draw, I would do it live on YouTube with my friend Danny. And I was also like microdosing at the time, but also trying to figure out how to microdose and find the right balance of microdosing at the same time while learning how to draw live on our YouTube. So that whole balance between all of that, I was like, well, if I could do it, guys, like it's just try it. Like, and I'm not, you know what? I do encourage microdosing. I'm not gonna say I don't encourage microdosing, but it's like just go out whatever you're trying to do. If it's art, if it's fucking anything, just fucking put some time aside and put some effort into it, and you can make it happen. And the only thing that's stopping you is yourself, and you'll have that community behind you and backing you the more you do it, and the more you like kind of ignore that inner voice that kind of makes us hesitant to express ourselves in a way.
And I think it's so important for people that have that drive, that creative drive, whatever form it takes, music or comics or whatever. I find that if you have that and you ignore it because you have a 40-hour work of work a week, that you are tired, you say, all right, I'm not going to do it this week. I'm not going to do this. What is the point anyway? It's like, well, the point is, if you have that creative thing inside of you, it wants to get out.
Yeah.
And if you don't let it out, that's when you get frustrated, and it makes your 40 hours of work unbearable. Because like you said, if you come out of that 40 hours and you're going home and enjoying the rest of your life and having so much fun, creating something, creating stories for people, like you said, giving people hope that they can also do this. It's such a huge boon to humanity to have art. If you can get that out of your system and out of your head and out of your soul, it's just such a big deal. Yeah. Sorry, that's
100%. I completely agree. And there's times I've gone where I finally broke out my bass, unpacking stuff, and I set up my little amp and everything. In my old place that we were living recently, I couldn't bring out my whole setup, but having my stuff out and just having it accessible, it kind of like makes me look forward to being like, oh, even if I play for 10-15 minutes, like I'm gonna be really happy, like
exactly.
That's gonna change you a little bit. And what you're saying about getting frustrated is that if you put it down too long and then you pick it up and then you think you're gonna be as good as you were previously, like no, like you got to remember, like you got to be got to continue doing it as much as you can. You're gonna have your off days for sure, and I think people overlook that too much, thinking like, oh, I missed a day, I'm fucked, it's all over. Maybe you might miss 2 days, but like as long as you go back and it's on your head, it's on your mind, and you're thinking about it, or maybe you're studying it, listening to something about it, or trying to learn a technique or something, and that still kind of counts. It's kind of like writing. People say you need to write every day, but if you're reading or if you're studying something, having that aspect and keeping craft on your mind, that's going to make you a better writer when you go back into it. Just like musically, listening to music and listening to like patterns and, breaking stuff down. When you pick up your instrument again, you're going to be that much better. So you may not be physically doing it every single day, but like making it part of who you are, that's going to make a huge difference to make it easier, and you'll feel more accomplished that way too.
Exactly.
I try to make sure that I do something every day that's contributing to my brand or my art or whatever, even if it's just stopping for a minute and reorganizing things, like just touching on what I'm trying to get done, like with my life every day,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just sometimes it's as simple as keeping a notebook out in your house, and like you have like 2 lines of dialogue that your character can use somewhere, and it was like, oh, that's really clever, I'd really like that. Or if you have, you take your guitar or bass out and you only have the 15 minutes, yeah, you might not sound great every time, but if you suddenly like it triggers enough to say, wow, this riff would be really fucking cool for this song down the road, it's like, all right, I've gotten something out of this. I've like I said, I've gotten something out of my soul that, came out into the world, and that's great. So,
and, figuring out what your limits are and surpassing them, like, and it applies to art, it applies to music. And I'm somebody who's really into working out as well. And there's a lot of stuff I do, I've been doing the last year working out, like kind of my roommate's really into like Matt Frazier and CrossFit and whatnot. So I've been doing a lot of like overhead snatches and overhead squats and stuff like that. And like when I hit a wall where I'm just like, I fail and I like can't get the bar over my head or something, or I just can't like do a squat of some sort. It's just too much. I've hit my limit, but it's just like, okay, I know where I can't go. Let me work up to that point now. Like I know what I need to work up towards. And then you get to that point, if you work up towards it, and then you set a new limit for yourself, and it just keeps on going and growing. But it takes time and patience, because I realize, maybe it made sense to me working out, because like how strong I was a year ago to how strong I am now, where I was like, damn, last year I could barely do like 60 pounds on front squats, and now I'm doing like 200 and something. It's like, it takes time, but once you take a step back and look at it all, it may not feel like it while you're doing it, but there is growth through all that.
Exactly. It's cumulative. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So going back to the community stuff you're talking about, that's one thing that I think is a great bridge between comics, indie comics, and the punk and music scene in general, is the communities, the importance of the community. And one thing that's wild to me about indie comics, I say this all the time to some people just to make them realize, but like there's a indie comics group online, like, you know, you have your online indie comics group, and those are the people that like you see all the time. But then like when you get out to I like to go to Zine Fest and things like that. And when you get out to a Zine Fest, you see like, you know, 80, 150 people that you never see online. And that's just in one place. And like when you multiply it out and out, and it's kind of cool today talking to you, because you've mentioned a lot of people that I don't know, but I feel like I know a lot of people in the indie comics community, and there's like, still it's not crossing over. Like it's such a big, amazing community out there. Like just blows my mind.
It really is, because you know the comic book industry makes it seem like it's real small, because it makes it seem like all that there is like, you know, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo at like DC, and then you have like, I don't know, I can't think of anyone at Marvel right now besides Donny Cates off the top of my head, but and Tom King's over at DC. Like it feels like there's like 20 people up there in that the big two, and then you go to like the indie, which is still mainstream, which is IDW and Dark Horse and stuff like that. And it still feels like, oh, this is a bit wider, but like it's not too much wider. And then you go to like the true indie, which is probably more like Mad Cave and stuff like that, where it seems like everyone's kind of unknown, but there's like a broad spectrum, but it still seems very tightly squeezed. And then like the true indie, which is like lesser known comics, which lesser known comics is probably on that underground level still too, where all of us in the underground, it's such a big community and you don't realize how big the underground movement is. But we're the ones that like, I feel like if you really, really love comics, that's the ones you're chasing after, like the underground books and the creator owned, because it's all of our imaginations coming out, and you know, almost no editing, in the sense of like nothing's holding us back to tell the stories we want to tell. Like a lot, I even have editors kind of look over my shit at a certain point, but it's like having the real true potential of creativity being harnessed in that underground era before it moves up the ladders to become mainstream, because underground isn't going to be mainstream. There's an underground for a reason, because it just doesn't catch that mainstream. But those are the real creative outputs that I really love at this point.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about having the resources like Kickstarter to really get a feel for what's out there. And I just kind of comb through the new page all the time and just look for those graphics that grab me, and yours obviously grabbed me immediately. And I was just like, if you can hit me in that one picture, which yours did, it draws you right in. And it just to see the amount of fantastic projects that are out there is like, we're in the same boat. We don't tend to follow the Marvels and the DCs as much. And it's like, you know, which we've joked about. It's like, which is why we'll never make a penny on this thing, probably. But it doesn't matter, because we're so happy to support other creators, both, you know, like up and coming artists and writers and musicians who are just putting it out there for everybody and having a just blast doing it. And that's the people we want to promote, is the people that are just having so much fun and want to support each other and bring each other up. That's the people we want to have on here.
And that totally makes sense too, because like, and you know, I realized this with Apollo, is that like you have a platform, and these creators don't have a platform. Like Instagram is kind of not, it's a platform to an extent, you know what I mean? There's still an algorithm you have to battle through and all that type of crap, but Instagram is so common, everyone has one. It's like having a fucking ID, you know what I mean? But by giving them an extra boost on your platform, giving them like an hour on your show, that does so much for them creatively, because it gives them encouragement. And that's, you know, gives them one more fan. And even if you give them one more fan, that's still one more fan more than they had before. And even like you know, even with Apollo, like at a certain point had like 30 people watching our show, and I was like, I don't really care if it's just 30 people watching our show. Like that means we have 30 people that are devoted to like checking out what we have to say.
Exactly.
I'm happy with that. And any type of boost when you're on this level of creativity and battling through the hundreds among thousands of creators out there, any little bit you'll kind of take and just like help encourage you to kind of push on. I mean, we all want to write Batman to a certain extent, you know what I mean? But like, are we all going to write Batman? No, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, those big two are big goals, but like, think about how much you might lose if you kind of go towards some of that. But
it's kind of funny. People ask me now, like I'll get that question out, and then like, somebody will say, okay, real quick, if you were gonna write Batman, what's your Batman story? And I'm like, I don't have one. Like I don't have a Spider-Man story. I don't, and I like the characters.
It'd end up being Blister turns into Batman for some reason.
Like
so
I write about myself in the 90s. Like it's
like I literally I don't have superhero comics coming out because I don't have superhero ideas. But I mean I fucking read Daredevil because Chip Zdarsky's writing Daredevil, and he's also writing Batman, so I'm fucking reading that. And I love Marvel and I love DC. In fact, most of my bookshelf right here is a lot of my Marvel DC stuff I read. But like I just don't have ideas for that. It's hard to like, I can't think of a Justice League scale story, but I could think about one about like a fucked up punk rock kid who does like a lot of drugs and goes on tour and fucking wants to fight cosmic beings in the universe, so that's like something I could definitely put my taste towards. And I mean like all my series, I mean Teenage Babylon is a cosmic punk rock love story, and it has elements of like Lovecraft in it. It has like a lot of space futuristic sci-fi elements in it, and it has very grounded, almost like kind of like Love and Rockets like relationship, like Chasing Amy almost like relationships, just like shit going on, like drama, like slice of life stuff. And my other series, Fake Your Death, was all like Smashing Pumpkins, My Chemical Romance influenced, and so that just gives you the tone of that fucking book. And so like, but none of them are superheroes. They're all about, kids. They're all about punks. They're all about kind of the outcast, people discovering themselves, people discovering that the world doesn't work for them, but art does. And they can't, they're willing to sacrifice whatever the world, has to offer to like make art, and that's always been a theme behind my stuff. And something I've really learned over life is that I used to work at like Apple, and like I was a manager at like a Banana Republic for years, and I just thought all that corporate shit was such bullshit. And it really is. And all that chasing, we all have iPhones, we all have Macs, and it's all good equipment. We all got to use it to a certain extent. We all shop at Target, whatever, but it's going out and being like, no, but when it comes down to it, like that's just part of how you have to kind of survive in the world. But my whole essence is total, like, this is all about me and my thoughts and my art and my creativity. And I can give a fuck about all that. As long as I get to come back and do this, because this is what's important. And too many people fall into that line of the corporate spectrum, I feel, in the sense of like, that's going to dominate their lives and that's what's going to make you happy, when it's like, they just haven't learned that lesson that they don't give a fuck about you. So why do you give a fuck so much about all of that? And go do what just makes you happy. And if it means creating something on your own, like a company or something, do that. Make your dreams happen and stop making other people's dreams happen in that sense. In another sense, I'm making people's dreams happen because I'm publishing them and fucking putting it out there. You know what I mean? There's like a difference in that aspect. I wanted to find that part.
You're not the man, don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh, Brandon, it was great having you on, man. That
thank you so much.
Really fast.
I can't believe it's already been an hour. Thanks for letting me babble. And I'm so exhausted from this move this week. I hope it was okay.
No,
but,
great.
It was a pleasure listening to you babble. Don't worry. It was everything we want to hear about, so it's all good.
Yeah, and I mean, Teenage Babylon will be coming out later on this year. I'd love to give you guys like a preview copy of it.
We would love to see you
back on for it.
We're trying to like make I'll do some quick info real fast. We're trying to like actually make a compilation album for the anthology soon, because a lot of us are in bands or make music, so you can expect music coming from this anthology pretty soon. We do have that Spotify playlist going on. There's still a week left of this Kickstarter, so everyone can still pledge. And I don't know, we have a lot of stuff planned, and it's very along your guys' alley, which I'm so glad you guys found us because you guys are right up my alley. So I can't wait to listen to more of your show, and I just can't thank you enough for reaching out.
That's always great to make a new friend.
Yes.
Welcome aboard. And John, it was always great.
Oh yes, always good hanging out.
And everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week. We have the band Exum. Avum.
You're screwing up, buddy.
Well, let me do that next week. They do songs about birds, or from the perspective of birds, or it's some good punk rock stuff.
Nice.
So,
you know what? If I could recommend one punk band real fast, I recently discovered Pink Shift. I don't know if you guys have heard of Pink Shift.
Love Pink Shift.
Pink Shift is dope. Yeah. Okay. I'll go with that. My one recommendation before we sign off on that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and peace.